So hi everybody, welcome to a EMA update, I'm going to call it. It's only, I thought it was a year ago, but I was reminded earlier, it was 3 or 4 months ago that as EMA, we set up a subcommittee to look at sustainability within our event sector and what we as a association and as individuals and on behalf of our corporations could do to drive sustainability or better sustainability within our industry. So it's really the objective of today is to get an update from our committee of what they found, what they've been talking about, what they're looking at, how they're highlighting things. And Christina and Claire are going to take us through that. But really as well, this is an interactive conversation. So any questions, any thoughts of how you can help guide or input to the committee, then please, raise a hand or go on mic, say something, or probably even better, put it in the chat and we can pull you in to the conversation. So let's have some interaction here. But before we kick off, on Thursday, there's a couple of webinars that EMA are involved with. We're doing a partnership thing with Higher Space. We've got a couple of members talking to 11 o'clock, and then at 11:45, myself and a couple of other members are talking about the sort of the return to live and what we've learned, what we've done, how we see it, and very much more about predictions of how the companies are adapting to the future of live and engagement. So come and join us at that. That's on the Higher Space Arena platform. And then at 12:30, we have our own webinar with Chris Mears and myself talking about recruitment and again, the event prof of the future, how Chris has seen it evolve, how he's seeing things involved in inquiries that are coming through for him, for people. So I think another interesting conversation. That's 12:30 on Thursday. And then just to remind everybody, next Thursday, there'll be more information coming out, but that'll be next Thursday at 4:30. We've got a very casual drinks party session with the guys from the Song Division. We just talked about that earlier, and that's bring the kids along, bring the dogs, bring the pets, bring everybody, bring your neighbours. It's just a bit of a fun, bit of a crack. Let our hair down, some of us who can. So with no further ado, as they say, Christine, Claire, let me hand over to you guys to give us an update on sustainability.
Yes, well, thanks, Richard. My name is Christina. I work for a company called General Assembly. We do upskilling and reskilling for organizations across the globe. And I head up their event marketing. And we've been working on this group with Claire and we have 5 people in total for the past couple of months. We only started and got together as a group in early March. But before we dig in, I would like for Claire to give a little bit of an introduction. Claire, okay?
Thanks, Christina. So a lot of you will know me anyway, but I'm Claire Melton. I currently head up the global events team at IHS Markit, which is a data and information company. Became involved in this group because at my last company, where I was until December last year, I was effectively the sustainability champion for events and for marketing. And it's something that I'm exceedingly passionate about because, as we'll hear through today's session, events just have such a significant impact on the environment and from a sustainability perspective. So have been working with Christina and the team on this, and it is shaping up to be a super interesting project. So over to you, Christina, to give some background.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, we only started to work, we've had a number of events on sustainability within EMA, but we only decided to form a working group a couple of months ago. And really what we want to achieve this work is to build guidelines and also take it a step further and really design a program of events around sustainability that hopefully are engaging for our members, but also push the sustainability agenda across the industry. We have been involved with some conversations with MIT magazine, and we know that across the industry there are lots of efforts around sustainability, but currently sometimes
Please stop hitting the thing.
I feel event professionals might feel that there is no clear sort of guidelines that they can follow. So really, the guidelines we're putting together, which we will update you on today, are the first step towards kind of achieving, you know, our goals and driving sustainability across EMA and the industry. So we will go in terms of kind of the structure of today's meeting. We will talk about how we've started thinking about sustainability within the guidelines, where we at the moment, and the different kind of phases of rollouts for these guidelines. We want to make them as useful to you as possible. So any feedback you have, please share it. We will have other sessions to continue with our kind of progress updates. So continue to give us feedback, because this is certainly really, really important. As it is a document, a work in progress, you know, we are going through some of the focus areas today, but it's really just a high level overview. There is so much work on it. So if we start kind of looking into our first area of focus, we've identified it as reducing waste and carbon emissions, which Claire and Elisa have been working really hard to put together. So Claire, would you like to give a little bit more of a kind of overview of what that section includes as it stands?
Sure, thanks, Christina. So I suppose this is a good point to say that looking at these areas, how we can reduce our sustainable, or our impacts rather, on the environment and increase our sustainability initiatives. This is a great time to do it, because none of us have been away, been on planes, been running events for the last 18 months. And it really has created an opportunity to pause and think about what we're doing as we're planning our events, and start to look at how we can implement some of these initiatives that we're going to talk about today. So Lisa, who's also on the call, and I have been looking at reducing waste and carbon emissions. There's obviously a huge area behind these, and it does sound like we're sort of oversimplifying, but hopefully once the document is published, you'll be able to see how much work has gone into this. And broadly, single-use plastics, going digital, giveaways, travel, food waste, they're massive umbrella terms and areas that we've been looking into, and there's so much more behind these. But just to give everyone on the call an idea, the typical event attendee produces nearly 2 kilos of waste per person per day. So if you're running an event for 500 people over 3 days, that gives you an idea about the sheer volume of waste that events produce. And then you multiply that by the number of events that take place globally over the course of a year. Just gives you an idea of how much waste is produced, and nearly 85% of that on last counts would end up in landfill. So that's a significant impact on the amount of non-recyclable waste that is just sitting in landfill as a result of the events we run. And on the carbon side, pre-pandemic, it was estimated that just the UK events industry was estimated to emit something like 1.2 million tonnes of carbon every year, which is something like 220,000 extra cars on the road. And it's just, figures like that are just mind-blowing when you think about the impact that the work that we're doing is having on our environment. So we've started looking at reducing waste and carbon emissions. As I say, covering areas like single-use plastics, it's just so much broader. We're talking about single-use items, whether that's paper scripts that end up you know, in the bin. Speakers turn up with their pre-printed scripts, running orders, table plans that go in the bin. So we're looking holistically at everything that potentially goes in the bin at an event versus what doesn't have to go in a bin necessarily, and how we can work on minimizing the amount of waste that's produced versus the amount of items, elements that we use that are recyclable, and hopefully eliminating some of that waste altogether. Going digital is a great way of doing that. it is taking some of the speakers that we work with and some of the production companies on something of a journey, persuading them to use digital run sheets and digital table plans. But certainly if we can reduce that waste, that would also reduce the amount of carbon that we're emitting. Giveaways, not all giveaways are created equal, as we've been discovering through our research. Giveaways that might be positioned as environmentally friendly have been flown in from China, and then you end up shipping them from wherever your office is, potentially out to another hub somewhere where you're running your event. So there's certainly a lot of thought needs to go into giveaways if we do them at all. And having just not been on site giving out giveaways for the last 18 months or so, we have an excellent opportunity to start rethinking what sorts of giveaways we are giving. So could you just flip back a slide, Christina? So I flicked on back. We're also talking about F&B and venues. Food waste, again, is a very broad term, very narrow term within the broader areas of venues, F&B. It's not just the waste that is generated by our menus, but the provenance of the food, locally sourced food, food miles are expressions that you'll hear quite a lot. How food's been produced, whether it's quality over quantity or quantity over quality. So there's a huge amount of research that's gone into that area that we're still working through. And there's an impact on the area of food waste and carbon emissions as well. So obviously, if you're looking at menus and food waste, be thinking about the amount of meat you're serving, the amount of that's being wasted, because the production of meat, the production of dairy, all contributes to significant carbon emissions. And finally, travel is pitched at being one of the biggest contributors of the carbon emissions that result as an event from running an event. And so reconsidering how delegates travel to events, where events are held, how they're held. We've just spent, a number of months online, successfully running events online that haven't required any travel. So what does that model now look like moving forward? I know we all were desperate to get back into rooms and start seeing our delegates face to face, but where are we doing that and how are we doing that? That means that as we return to live, the impact of travel is not going to have a significant impact again on the environment through the carbon emissions that are being produced. And then the paper will look at how we measure our impact. Obviously measuring waste output, it's very visible. You can see it in the number of effectively black bags that are generated at the end of an event. Carbon emissions are far more difficult to measure with the naked eye, so to speak, but there are certainly ways of being able to measure carbon emissions. And for us event professionals, there are more and more ways online now. There are calculators available. There are basic formulas that are available that can be used from the point at which delegates register to take their data to measure what the impact of their travel, how far they're traveling, how long they're staying for, the meals that you'll be serving. All of those elements feed into these calculators that will tell you what your carbon emissions for the event will be. And then there's the potential to look at carbon offsetting schemes where you pay a certain amount per tonne of carbon that's emitted, normally something like $4 per tonne. And then you can effectively offset your emissions by paying for schemes, mainly tree planting, that will provide some degree of compensation against the carbon emissions that are being emitted. It's certainly not the be all and end all and should be a last resort once you've looked at doing everything else to reduce your waste and carbon emissions, but definitely something that people should be considering and something that we cover off in the document as well. Christina.
Lovely. Thanks, Claire. Let me know if you can hear me well, because I think my mic is a little bit funny today, but I think it's worth mentioning the way we're kind of looking at the guidelines is we've divided the rollout by phases. So reducing waste and carbon emissions is a massive chunk. There is a lot of work, lots of research to go into it to make sure that what we produce is actually helpful and useful and you can put it into practice. So reducing waste and carbon is part of phase 1. And then the second element, which is part of phase 1, is influencing the supply chain. So this really looks into how are we working with our suppliers. And in the cycle of event, we work with a number of different suppliers, but and there will be a lot added to this, but really kind of the main focus is what are our requirements as we are procuring these suppliers, and every time when we start planning for a new event, what are the questions that we should be asking from the outset? And these will obviously kind of help us in determining which suppliers we want to work with and which suppliers we can't really work with because they might not be sustainable at all, which I think nowadays everybody is trying to do their bit. But I think some of these questions will be very helpful in determining exactly how they align with your goals and objectives. So looking at venues, what is their location? How are they approaching sustainability? What are the materials that they're using in the venue? Do they recycle? What do they recycle? How supportive, even if they don't offer certain services, how supportive they are to you to kind of achieve these sustainability goals. Just overall, how is that incorporated into their paperwork and marketing? With some venues, we know that they kind of differ a lot regionally, so it's not always easy to source a venue purely based on whether they're sustainable or not, but it's really kind of assessing how they align with your particular kind of needs and what matters most to you, what has the biggest impact. It's also how they approach food. We talked about food waste, so there is definitely an overlap here, but how do they serve the food? Now with COVID, everybody is, there is probably, or there was at least for a certain period of time, end to buffets, everything had to be packaged. Let's talk about packaging. That is a big section here. And it's also how do they source the food? So something Claire mentioned already. Is it locally sourced? Is it sourced in a sustainable manner? Do they grow their vegetables on site and things like that? What do we do with the food afterwards? And building branding, which is a big part of what we do. There are so many different options out there when we work with suppliers, and we have kind of we've been speaking to different industry leaders in the kind of building branding to collect some insight into what are the materials that we should be looking out for, materials that are recyclable, materials that are reusable. And the most important elements when we think about building branding is really always starting with, can we reuse? Whatever we're building, how can this be reused? And that should really be always our first question, because it just means that you are, by kind of reusing elements, it just means that you're wasting less. And also financially, it makes more sense. And then looking at the specific materials, something might look good, but it might not be recyclable. I used to use like foam boards a lot in my old job because they seem to be, I don't know, I guess they could brand them. They looked really nice, but foam boards are not, they're not recyclable. So I know that different suppliers, they are upping their games and they're looking at ways to make the materials that they, to kind of shift to materials that are recyclable. But really what we've done is we've compiled a list that kind of gives a little bit more information as to what is recyclable and what not, so that when you look at working with these building branding companies, you have a better idea. And then also, I know that within EMA, not everybody, organizes exhibition style events, but this section would be helpful to people who do. So working with sponsors is how do you kind of frame the messaging and to make sure that as you onboard them, sustainability is at the front of their mind as well, and making sure that they get the most out of the event whilst also being sustainable and following the sustainability guidelines. So all of this, by the way, everything that we talk about within the guidelines will be put into a checklist, which we'll see how that will be presented. Currently, it's in a spreadsheet format, but it really is a kind of what are the questions that we should be asking all of these suppliers as we commence working with them, or before we have even actually recruited them, so that it's quite helpful when we've split it into the different categories. So hopefully that will be useful. In terms of phase 2, we will be that will be rolled out later on, and we will really be kind of looking at how do we communicate data, because we have all of these great initiatives and great ideas, but what do they actually mean in practice, and how do we influence others to follow these steps towards sustainability? So the 2 main points here are communicating with attendees. So thinking about how do you incorporate your sustainability goals and impact, most importantly, the impact that they have in your signage, for example. And also kind of looking at it from an internal standpoint. When we talk about sustainability, I've heard colleagues say, well, it's much more expensive, I don't really have the budget, my leadership, they don't, it's not a priority right now, I can't justify spending a little bit more just because it's sustainable product. Hopefully we will soon move away from that sort of thinking, but really data is what will kind of get them to understand that how you position your brand is essentially how you drive business as well. So getting that internal buy-in will be the focus of that second sub category. And then the last bit will be procurement strategy. These will be just examples of language that you can use in your agreements, and kind of sustainability standards that should be part of your contractual negotiations with suppliers. That might be quite helpful. In terms of how we are doing, timeline-wise, as I said, we did start as a team only 2.5, 3 months ago, and we're at a good position at the moment, just refining really what these guidelines will look like, doing some editorial, and the actual piece. So we're hoping to have that rolled out in July time, so that we think that that can be quite useful as you start looking into going back to live and booking events in Q4 and the beginning of next year. That's for phase 1, and then phase 2, communicating with data and kind of what sort of language we can incorporate contractually. That will hopefully be available to come out in December time. But it's important to say this is ever evolving. We will be obviously adding more to the guidelines as we go. And with that said, we will also be incorporating obviously the feedback that you give us. But with that said, I wanted to kind of talk through the next steps as well. Apart from us continuing to update you on our progress, we're also thinking about what events we can design as a kind of ongoing really initiative within the sustainability campaign. So there will be the ideas that we've kind of come up so far are obviously events which are internal with guest speakers where we can hopefully kind of deep dive into different case studies. I think that would be quite interesting. Supplier presentations where they can come in, for example, a building branding company or a caterer can come and talk to us about how what their sustainability efforts are, how they work with their buyers. looking into kind of key metrics, so what's most impactful or how to even kind of calculate some of these might be an interesting topic. And we're looking to also, have some speaker slots at industry conferences where we can design agenda around sustainability and spread the word, hopefully cross industry. I did mention that we've had some conversations with MNIT. They are really looking to push different associations to work together towards a sustainable future. So we will be working with them as well. Is there anything else you wanted to add as part of kind of update overview before we open up for discussion?
So, I mean, I think feedback from this group is always very welcome. So based on what we've talked about today, and as we work through the stages, it's great to have everybody's feedback, because obviously as a group, we can only do so much. We only have so much experience between us. So happy to hear any thoughts at any time.
Thanks, guys. I think that's a great update, and you've done, as the subcommittee, have done an enormous amount of work to get to where you are, at this point, and it's really helpful. It's great to see us as an association starting to put some structure around this sustainability as a key initiative, and also our DEI on diversity and inclusion. What we're doing there, and hopefully it will help drive change within the industry far beyond just ourselves and our own membership. And I think that's, to me, has always been the key opportunity of around sustainability, is influencing the supply chain, because those are your users, and that's hotels, production companies, etc., etc. I think what the lady said beforehand, in my view, every company, I mean, all of your companies that you guys worked for will have a sustainability policy. I would be shocked if they didn't, and if they don't, then drive them to have one. But I'm sure they have. But I think our role and responsibility within this is to look at that policy and then say, okay, so what can we do within our roles and our department? I think, like Claire, you said you were head of sustainability for events within CBRE. And I don't know if we have people within the events teams, within your teams, who are responsible for looking at sustainability. The other thing I would say there is, Christine, like you said, guys, we're at a starting point with this. If anyone's further along, or if anyone wants to get involved and we have some ideas, then let's have those ideas or documents that we can share and adopt and change. Yeah, that's my point on all of this. Does anybody else want to jump into the conversation? Everyone's listening. So Christine, tell me a bit more about the timeline. You talk about, when are we going to be able to start sharing some documents?
Yeah, we're hoping to have
paper or something.
Yes, we're hoping to have the phase 1 of the guidelines shared in July time, just ahead of everybody, hopefully kind of going back to or looking to book events for end of year, beginning of next year. And then phase 2 will come towards the end of the year. So yes, hopefully we'll have something to share with everybody around July. If earlier, we'll aim to have it earlier, but that will be a bonus. But that's kind of the timeline we're looking at the moment.
Okay, and I saw sort of like 4 initiatives there, which was, okay, the overall picture right at the end of the day about reducing waste. So you're going to the paper you're going to produce is going to sort of come up, look at these areas and then give some ideas and thoughts. And it's a guidance document, isn't it? We're not telling you this is what you have to do. Here is some guidance to help you start to influence and support sustainability within your activations. There's the reduction of waste. Supply chain, like I've said, is a big one to me, because once we start to ask the questions of the supply chain and perhaps put it into procurement policy, then that's a massive initiative across the market. And then I like your I wrote down here the engaging and reporting and tracking. So I think that's a really important thing, that we can prove to the companies that, you know, by doing this, it has this impact, and this is the probably the change dial on things, you know, how we're going to move to a more sustainable future. And then structure and procurement is further down the road, but that's when it becomes policy within your buying habits as an organization, because I'm sure most businesses have procurement departments that take charge of this.
Yeah, and I think the thing I'd say, Richard, is that there'll be a huge amount in there about measures that you can take, but certainly the expectation is not that everyone's trying to do everything, because it's way better to pick one thing and do it very, very well than it is to try and do everything and just not achieve anything by spreading yourself too thin. So I think Christina would agree, the aim of the guide is to give people an idea about the measures that they can be taking and should be taking, but certainly not all at the same time if that's not achievable. And for some companies that won't be achievable, but hopefully we provide enough guidance to help people make a decision about what they can achieve and then implement that first.
Yeah, I mean, there's this big conversation on sustainability, isn't it? It's like, well, you know, what difference does it make with me, you know, having 3 bottles of plastic water in a plastic bottle a week or something? It's like, the problem is, if everybody on the planet does that, then it's enormous. And we have all seen pictures of beaches. There was Joanna Lumley's travel program the other night. She went from Cuba to Haiti, and the pictures of the beaches there were just, well, astounding. They're beautiful beaches, but just miles and miles of plastic bottles getting washed up on the shore, and no one's clearing them up. But they shouldn't be there in the first place. And what that's doing. And I think there is. So I've always said there's about the individual, what you as an individual can do, and we all know, hopefully we all do our recycling religiously. But it's then, you know, what can we do as a company on behalf of our company, and you know, how can we influence the broader marketplace supply chain, and also improving what they do.
Does anyone have any comments or thoughts, or just want to share where they are on their journey? Sustainability journey, that is.
Okay, well, nobody else wants to join the conversation. I'm sure everyone's busy listening and writing some notes, but don't want to commit. Okay, so with that in mind, guys, I'm going to say a thank you. It's going to be great when we sort of write up the documents and get this report out. We are going to be pushing this now. The agenda, the guys have got to, in my view, you know, they've climbed quite a few steps to get to where they are, but they're still like the first, well, the second rung of the ladder. The first rung of the ladder is to get to this point. Now the next point is to start right now driving the conversation more across EMA and our membership, and influencing everybody else to sort of get involved, get engaged, and drive some change within what you are doing within your organization, and sharing best practice. And that's a big thing. If people can sort of say, look, okay, here's, you know, this is what we've done, this is what we're doing, this was got some great results from this, that would be great. But Adis and the rest of your committee, thank you so much for the work you've been doing so far, and look forward to further updates.
Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to Natalia and Emma and Lisa as well, who've been part of the team, and thanks for all your collaboration and work and passion for sustainability.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.